Hello, everyone. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller, representing Secretary Pollock here. Consistent with Governor Baker's emergency orders under COVID-19, we are having this meeting virtually. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please make sure you've renamed yourself to include your full name and organization or affiliation. Board members, please include MPO member in your affiliation. I will conduct a roll call at the outset of the meeting to establish a quorum. I will ask each MPO member to raise their hand so we can find you and unmute you. To participate in the discussion, MPO members will be prompted to raise your hand, and then I will call on you and we'll unmute you. And the same procedure will be used for members of the public. So, Jonathan, oh wait, let me read this. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Rosine Foley, MPO staff at rfoley, F-O-L-E-Y, at ctps.org, or call her at 857-702-3704. Okay, John, I think you can call the roll, please.
Okay,
MPO members, please raise your hand so we can find you and unmute you. Go ahead, Jonathan, when you're ready.
thank you, Mr. Chair. MassDOT Chair.
David Moeller, I'm here.
Thank you. Mass DOT 2. Is John Bouchard here?
He is not.
He is not. Okay. MassDOT Highway.
John Romano, I'm here.
Thank you. MBTA.
Samantha Silverberg, MBTA, present.
Thank you. Massport. Okay. MAPC.
Eric Barassa is here.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Not seeing Brian.
Okay. Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm here. Sorry about no. Something was hidden behind the screen. Leonard Diggins here. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Leonard. City of Boston BTD.
Tom Katz is City of Boston, representing Mayor Walsh.
Thank you. City of Boston BPDA.
Jim Fitzgerald with the BPDA, representing Mayor Walsh, City of Boston.
Thank you. At-large City of Everett.
Not seeing anyone.
Okay. At-large City of Newton. Okay. At-large Town of Arlington. At-large Town of Lexington.
Sheila Page, representing Doug Lucente, the Select Board Chair, and all the towns of the MPO region.
Thank you. Intercourse Somerville.
Tom Bent, representing City of Somerville, Mayor Joe Curtatone in the Intercore.
Thank you. Magic Acton. Okay. Metro West Framingham.
Patrick Keyser, representing Mayor Spicer, Metro West.
Thank you. North Shore Beverly. North Suburban Woburn.
Good morning. I'm sorry. Tina Cassidy, representing Woburn Mayor Scott Galvin and the North Suburban Planning Council.
Thank you. South Shore Rockland.
Jen Constable, Town of Rockland, representing South Shore Coalition.
Thank you. SWAT Medway. And Trick Norwood NRRC.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke, representing Trick in the town of Norwood.
Great, thank you. I think a few other people have added on since I think I saw Newton came on board.
David Kozis at Large City, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the city of Newton.
Thank you. And Everett.
Yeah, Jay Monty, City of Everett, representing Mayor DiMaria.
Okay, thank you. I believe that calls the members, any ex officio members, FHWA?
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
Okay.
Jonathan, I believe we
yeah.
also have John Bouchard on the phone.
Oh, okay. Master John Bouchard?
John Bouchard representing Mass DOT here.
Thank you.
And we've got Darlene from Beverly as well.
Okay. Beverly, Darlene, can you say your name, please? Darlene?
Darlene is having some audio issues. She said that she's working on it right now.
Okay.
But show her, Jonathan, show her as present because we know she's here and she's in communication with us. We'll just
Will do.
call the roll.
Will do. I believe that calls the roll, Mr. Chair, unless someone else has come on board that I don't know.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we do have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I do not have one at this time. After that is executive director's report. Tegan?
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chair. So I do have a few things for the board today that I'd like to share. Nothing too out of the ordinary, but there are a few items. First, I wanted to cover a staffing topic, which is I've mentioned that we were going to begin recruiting for the Deputy Executive Director position, which has been open since before my tenure started. And I'm hoping to have that job description posted publicly before the next MPO board meeting on August 20th. So please keep an eye out. Please share when you see that posting and let me know if you have any questions. Then I'd like to move on to a couple of outreach highlights. There were certainly a few outreach meetings that happened since the last MPO meeting. So first, if you'll recall, we talked about the next pilot transit working group meeting. It was held on July 20th, and the intent of those meetings are to facilitate coordination between transit providers. And also it's an opportunity to sort of help them understand what's going on at the MPO and provide input. This one focused on the MBTA's COVID-19 planning, both in the short term and the medium term, and also, related to not just service planning, but also some of the policy decisions that are being made in the context of COVID-19. So we had Kat Banesh, who's the Chief of Operations Strategy, Policy and Oversight, and Laurel Paget-Seekins, who's the Assistant General Manager for Policy and Oversight, and they presented and answered questions. We had about 79 people. We had representatives from RTAs, TMAs, municipalities, councils on aging, advocacy organizations, and members of the public. So I think that it's just worth saying that we appear to continue to be serving the goal of helping to facilitate some healthy, coordination and interaction. And it's also given us a chance to talk about opportunities to leverage MPO resources like the COVID-19 Transit Technical Resource Program. So we'll talk about, at some point in the future, what its future is like. But so far, I would say it's going well, and we'll have notes posted soon. After that, I wanted to comment on some of the TIP criteria outreach. There was a focus group held on July 27th with board members. There were 7 of you who participated, so thank you very much for your feedback. It was focused on the TIP project selection criteria and specifically the point allocations for those. So your feedback is now being used to refine the proposals that you've seen, and the full board will have the chance to see a presentation and weigh in at the next MPO meeting on August 20th. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, a public survey has been released to get broader input on the TIP criteria changes you've been discussing. That survey will be out until August 24th. And I wanted to highlight that to amplify the outreach on this, we are partnering with Union Capital Boston. I believe this is a group that Kate White has commented or talked to you about in the past. They are a community engagement organization focused on people of color and low-income populations. And they have a membership of about 22,250 people. And with our partnership with them, they can broadcast our survey through their mobile app and their email and text chains and other ways of reaching those members. So it's a really great way to sort of amplify and diversify our outreach and input on the TIP criteria. And then hopefully you saw that that was also paired, the survey's been paired with the TIP criteria update guidebook. I'd really urge you to take a look at it and particularly let us know what you think. It's got a lot of information, but I think it's pretty accessible and it has a lot of links to some of the full tables and the videos of the presentations that you've seen. But it's nice and it's visual, and I think it's a good complement to the discussions. So please take a look and share with others if you think it's helpful. And then finally, in terms of outreach, I wanted to mention, I think, a new strategy that we'll try to employ with you, which is that I'd like to use a minute or so occasionally in these meetings, in my ED reports, to highlight comments that we're getting outside of the MPO meetings and the public, sort of typical public response periods. We intermittently get comments about projects that we'd like to make sure that the board are aware of. And every now and then, this may be, I think, a good place just to summarize a few of those. Please let me know your feedback on that. The idea would be that we could share those with you via postings in advance, and then just kind of highlight them in this executive director report to see if you have any questions. I won't talk about any comments right now, except to say that we have received some on the reconstruction of Malaya Cass Boulevard, which is funded in federal fiscal year 2019 in the TIP, and also a prospective project, which is the Belmont Community Path. But we'll follow up with you to share those comments and then, allow, questions at some future point if you would like to talk about them. So I believe that is all I wanted to talk about in terms of outreach. Quickly, today we have a few work scopes. These are non-MPO funded, but again, we ask for your approval given that they involve significant work effort. One of them is the Silver Line Extension work scope, and it builds off the Lower Mystic and Everett studies. Bruce Kaplan will present this, and I think this is great building off of other studies, and again, both of these I think meet MPO goals. The other one is related to assisting MWRTA and expanding transit service to Sundays, and Jonathan Belcher will present that. We'll also ask you to discuss public comment and endorse the second UPWP amendment. And then this morning in the UPWP subcommittee, we also discussed our fourth quarter amendment, which we do each year, where we ask for sort of reallocation of some of the funds that we budget in the UPWP to account for how things have evolved over the year due to staffing changes, due to things like changing priorities, or evolving understanding of studies. And of course, this year we have COVID-19 as well. So we'll talk to you about those. We have a TIP Amendment 7 to vote to endorse today for the 20 to 24 TIP. It's about allocating funding for on-demand shuttle services to MWRTA. And ideally, this will be our last TIP amendment of the fiscal year. Wish us luck. And then in terms of successful shuttles, that guidebook is going to be the last item. And I'm really looking forward to staff sharing this with you. I think it's a wonderful example of a work product from the studies that you fund. And I am excited to hear your feedback on how well you think that can serve the purpose of providing good best practices more broadly throughout the region. So that's it for today. Next meeting, we'll try to resolve both the TIP criteria point allocation, and we'll also be trying to wrap up the major infrastructure discussion. So please take a look and keep track. There'll be some materials in advance that you should be able to review. So with that, Mr. Chair, thanks for bearing with me, and I would welcome any questions or feedback.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Lynn Diggins.
Yes, a comment and a question. And so I like the idea of the outside comments coming to us either, in this meeting or maybe in an attachment before the meeting or whatever. But I very much like to see more of those comments. And secondly, well, I guess the second comment is the criteria guidebook is very good, and I especially appreciate the references to the advisory council in that, even with the link to one of our meetings. So that made me smile. And so my question though is, when reading the guidebook, I saw that it said that the reader should take the survey, and I'm wondering, should MPO board members take that survey? That's it. Thank you.
I think it's a good question. Let me defer to the MPO, some of the staff working on that survey, what their expectations are. I think we've incorporated a lot of your feedback, but you may have more to offer in that survey. So, but let me defer to the staff who published that survey.
Yeah, this is Kate White. I'm happy to answer that. Len, it's open to anyone who wants to take it, so you're definitely welcome to take the survey. And we encourage anyone who's interested to take it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Tegan? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is public comments. If there's any member of the public who would like to make a comment at this time, please raise your hand. Seeing none, if you have a comment later on during the meeting, raise your hand and we will call on you. Next up is a report of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Lynn? Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, Lynn, I skipped the committee chairs reports. Ben, do you have one?
Nothing today. Tegan covered it in her report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Now, Lynn, Regional Transportation Advisory Council report.
Yeah, you really threw me off on that one. So that's okay. I had a hard enough time for like the first 10 meetings. So anyways, we had a really good bonus meeting. It was with Casey Marie Claude, and she talked about the pedestrian report card assessment interactive database, and ever since she had done a presentation to the board back in November last year, I wanted to meet with her, and it was very much worth the while. I think not only did we get a lot of it out of it, but she did too, which is always a bonus when you have a guest. And we had people participating that weren't part of the advisory council, which is a good thing too. They were interactive, asked some good questions, and so I think it was recorded, so I think it's very much worth the viewing if people would like to see it. And with respect to our upcoming meeting on the 12th, it's going to be a prolonged meet and greet where members will talk about their organizations, and we'll also fold that into a meeting where we get to explore goals in a very casual way, mostly by getting people to talk about what they'd like to see on upcoming agendas. So whether you're a member or not, we encourage you to attend and give some feedback on what you'd like to hear or see RTAC cover over the next year or so. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Excellent. Any questions for Lynn from MPO members? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is an action item on a work scope for Silver Line extension. Bruce?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Great. Thanks, David. This work scope is in support of MassDOT's Silver Line Extension Alternative Analysis Project. And as Tegan had earlier mentioned, where this is building off the work of the Lower Mystic study, which sort of roughly ran 2016 to 2018, as well as the Everett Transit Action Plan, which ran roughly 2015 to 2017. And in this study, we're, again, supporting the alternative analysis. We're going to examine up to six different service plans or alignments for the extension of Silver Line 3 from Chelsea towards North Station. excuse me, we're going to collaborate with the study team naturally, MassDOT's project and study team on developing these alternatives. And all of these alternatives will include service, or there will have an element including service to Everett, and that's a key part of it, as well as we are looking at various alignments, again, down towards North Station, possibly going including Kendall Square, Leechmere, going into Somerville, along certain different alignments, whether to Union or to along the Inner Belt or on Washington Street. Again, nothing is kind of set in stone yet that we're going to be developing these, but those are the sort of things we're going to be investigating, as well as kind of a combination of different kinds of service plans. There may be 2 or 3 different alignments in one sort of service plan. And we're going to measure the impacts on ridership, roadway traffic, emissions. We're going to do environmental justice analyses on these to see benefits and burdens and how they shake out in terms of accessibility and mobility. And there's 1-year time frame, and it's scoped at $115,000. That's pretty, I'd say pretty straightforward in terms of the scope here.
Thank you, Bruce. Any questions for Bruce from the members? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second?
I'm sorry, David, we do have some questions. We've got Jay Monty.
Do you see? I don't see his hand raised. Am I not looking at this?
No, my hand's raised. I see his hand raised. That's all
There
right.
it is. I see 3 hands raised now. Go ahead, Jay.
Thanks. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to everybody at the T, everybody at MassDOT Planning for moving this forward. This is huge. I can't emphasize this enough. The area that this goes through in Everett, we get on a monthly basis now, and this is, during the height of the pandemic, we're getting development proposals for projects of 500, 600, 700 units at a go. We have over 2,000 housing units now in the development pipeline in Everett that have reached the planning board. That will be, most of which will probably be constructed in the next few years. So, this is an area that is today transit starved. And when we talk about policy goals, especially, we've talked a lot about parking ratios, the need to dial down, parking requirements. And this is an area where we have done that, where we reduced parking requirements. And yet what we found is developers, they come in, they comply the new minimums, even go under that. So we've had projects come in at, under one space per unit. And then what happens, they go back to to get their financing, and they go to the banks, and the banks tell them, you can't build your project with 3/4 of a space per unit because there's no transit here. They've come back to us and then amended their projects for parking ratios greater than our minimums for that reason. So this is one of those chicken and egg scenarios where I know it's difficult to want to put in service sometimes where there's not already a huge demand, but I would point to this and say, here's conclusive evidence to say that if we don't do a project like this very soon, we're not going to meet our goals on transit mobility and reduced vehicle dependency. So again, I'm really excited to see this here. The city of Everett is committed to not only being a part of this, but we're putting our own funds on the table here to further this work. We have several $100,000 from the Gaming Commission. We have our own capital funds to look at some of the area roadways that may accommodate the Silver Line. So we're putting all our cards on the table here for this project. This is huge for us. It's badly needed. So again, thank you to everybody for getting this on the agenda for the next year.
Thank you, Jay. Next, Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of to echo what Jay said, I think, obviously the folks that were involved in the Lower Mississippi Regional Working Group, this was one of the main recommendations of that work. So it's good to see that we're getting to it. Just want to sort of confirm the obvious that the city will be part of that working group, I'm assuming. And, just a quick question on the actual scope. I think Bruce said 6 scenarios. Does that include 6 different alignments, or is that a mix of alignments and service plans?
Bruce?
That would be a mix.
Okay.
I would say.
So-
For example, there might be one that is, an extension that directly doesn't go via Somerville, Cambridge, but for the same scenario, we're also running an alignment via Somerville, Cambridge to North Station. So, and that would count as one alternative. We might test them individually. We might test, them, as a package together. So, yeah.
All right. And then just another question on land use assumptions. Like Everett, we continue to have development brewing in Charlestown for sure, in addition to kind of what's already official. So I'm just wondering if we're using kind of the modified from the Lower Mississippi Regional Working Group scenario, or if we're sticking with the kind of LRTP land use scenario.
We have scoped it out to use the LRTP. Now that's not, I would say, we usually try to stick with that, but again, we would be listening to the working group here. We would be listening to the project team and see how that kind of might proceed and progress with that. We're here to do the work. We're not here to necessarily dictate the terms. Doug Johnson is the MassDOT project manager, I believe, is on the call. If he wants to add anything, but I think that we're here to listen. We're here to kind of develop that and move forward on that.
So there's some openness to thinking about, more recent kind of land use potential changes.
You know us, Jim. We're always open to listen.
All right. Just wanted to confirm. I know you are. Thank you.
Samantha Silverberg?
Hi, I just wanted to make a couple of points here. Obviously supportive of this, as it is an MBTA funded project. If for those of you who remember Focus 40, when we talked about that not too long ago, Focus 40 identified Everett as one of our inner core communities lacking rapid transit, and also as this particular project as one of the handful of next priorities in terms of expansion of potential expansion of the MBTA network. So this is an important next step in understanding the feasibility, alignment, and potential benefits of that. Obviously Everett's been a great partner given all the work they've done on transit priority. So that also comes into our consideration there. And then the third point, obviously we're not there yet, but I do want to kind of put a bug in everyone's ear that when it comes time to the next steps of this, BRT projects fare quite well in the US DOT build program, formerly known as TIGER, and also in the FTA capital investment grant small starts program, which almost everything in the small starts program right now is BRT. So there are some external sources of funding should we get to that point in the coming years.
Thank you, Sam. Next up is Leonard Diggins.
Well, of course, I support it, but I'm trying to mainly because I have a question for those of us who are interested a lot in TOD, and maybe this goes to Jay. I'm curious as to why it is that the banks made reject projects that have 3/4 of a parking space, or give pressure to developers to increase that ratio. So
the banks, if they're going to finance a project, want to make sure that they can sell these units, whether they're apartments or condos, whatever they are, and they see a lack of parking spaces as not being marketable, or I say lack of mobility, let's say, right? So lack of mobility is not a marketable unit to them. If there's good transit, that's mobility, that's marketable component of the project. If there's no transit and no parking, or not enough parking, that's going to lower, in their view, right? I'm not saying I agree with this, but it's going to lower the rent. It's going to lower the market value of the unit. And so, part of their financing terms end up being that if there's no transit, no frequent transit, they expect a higher parking ratio. So, my point is basically, we've discussed a lot through, a number of working groups below Mystic, we talk about this all the time, the importance of lowering parking ratios. And in other areas of the city where we have, frequent bus service, we have developers who are more than happy. We have actually about 100 units going in now that are under construction or will be shortly with a total of, I think, 30 parking spaces between the two of them. One of them is 20 units without any parking spaces. But there's frequent bus service there, and the banks have gone along with that. But this area here, which is along the Route 16 corridor, is primarily brownfields. It's not on any bus routes today, and so the only mobility access here is right now by private vehicle, and the banks know that, and they therefore are asking for higher parking ratios.
All right, Jay, thank you. Please, I'll follow up with you some more in person. Thank you.
Tom Bent?
In essence of time, I just want to say ditto to what Jay has said and Jim, and that some of us looking forward to working with the group on this. And, glad to hear that Union Square and Washington Street is being considered also. And basically, like Jay just said, we recently permitted 90 units in Union Square with no parking at all.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments from members at this time? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to approve the work scope as presented today? Please raise your hand so we can unmute you and state your name for the record. Eric Barassa.
I'll make a motion to approve this work scope.
Thank you. Motion being made. Is there a second?
Tom Bent is raising his hand.
Yep. John Bent seconds this motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, I will come back. John Romano,
Try that again. John Romano, yes.
Thank you. Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Tom Kazas, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis, Sheila Page. Oh, sorry.
David Kozis, it took a while. David Kozis, yes.
Thank you. Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Nguyen, okay, we'll come back. Tina Cassidy. Oh,
Sorry.
Darlene.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Thank you. Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
and I'll see if John Bouchard. Okay, that calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Daniel Amstutz has joined the meeting.
Oh. Daniel Amstutz.
Sorry, joining late. Assuming this is about the Silver Line extension, in which case I will vote yes.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an action item on the work scope for Metro West Regional Transit Authority Planning Assistance. Jonathan Belcher.
Thanks, David. And, hello, board. The scope in front of you today is a $75,000 12-month effort that is funded through and requested by the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. MWRTA, since their start in 2006, has operated fixed route bus service Monday through Saturday. They have never operated Sunday service. They approached us about assisting them in evaluating the potential for Sunday service, where it might make the most sense to run it and how to run it if they wanted to proceed with that. They have automatic passenger counters on their buses. They will be providing us with data from those vehicles that we can evaluate. We will primarily be looking at the off-peak ridership, mostly on Saturday, to see what the patterns are and to see where it suggests that there might be the greatest potential for service on Sunday. They also have been surveying their passengers as an ongoing effort. They will provide us with survey data from their passengers, and they have a specific question in their surveys about interest in Sunday service from their existing riders. When we have that information gathered and evaluated, we will then assist them with looking at the route structure, what makes sense, especially again on what's running on Saturday, to start running a Sunday service. Would it make sense to maybe combine routes versus running it exactly as services operated on a Saturday? We would also look at what the patterns are of if a lot of the riders seem to be going to retail locations, either for work or to shop. Would it make sense for the Sunday service to match the hours that the retail locations are open, which would most likely be different than a Saturday? When we have gathered all that information, we will put it together in a technical memo, including any recommendations for service. The initial evaluation is going to be with pre-COVID ridership data. However, as their data collection is ongoing, one reason for the length of the project scope is as they get additional information, looking at how they're recovering and where it is in the network, we could apply that to the assumptions for the Sunday service and maybe modify any initial recommendations based on the later data that we might be able to get from them. And that's about it.
Thank you, John. Questions for Jonathan from MPO members? Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Belcher. Hi. So does the team have good elasticity data on frequency of service?
There's some assumptions that are used. You know, a larger urban system like the MBTA might have different results than a smaller operation like Metro West. You know, the frequencies in Metro West are generally already in the 60 to 70 minute headways. So I don't know. We do have information just for Sunday service in general from the National Transit Database. They do collect ridership data from all agencies in the country, splitting up between weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we would also probably be looking at what patterns are in general, maybe both for smaller systems in the Northeast, other systems in Massachusetts. The ratio of Sunday service to say Saturday service ridership is one thing we might look at and use as part of making some projections for what we think might happen if they initiated Sunday service.
I got you. I mean, so from what I heard in that response though, is that it seems like they are already used to like 60 to 70 minute headways. Is that on weekdays and weekends, or just on I mean, is that headway already on weekdays, or is that the 67 minute? It is.
They do
even
run.
Go ahead.
That is their base schedule for most of their service. They have been running some commuter shuttles that run meet specific trains, but their fixed routes that are running all day are usually on a between 60, sometimes 70 or 80 minute frequency. Have in service on one of their routes, I think, to run every 30 minutes, the Route 4 service from downtown Framingham to the mall area. But for the most part, they're already running those longer frequencies. And that's not unusual for smaller agencies, both in the state and across the country, I would say.
Got you. That's good to know. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynn.
Sure.
Sheila Page.
Hi, thank you. Yes, we fully support this project. As a resident of Natick, I know it's a high interest in our area. but also for Lexington, Bedford, Arlington, our connection up to the Burlington Mall. We have no Sunday service through our Lexpress program and also the MBTA. So we'll be interested in your findings. So thank you for bringing this project forward.
Sure, thank you.
Thatcher Keyser.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add, this is a service we're looking for in Framingham. Just making note that in downtown Framingham, we are adding over 1,000 new housing units in the downtown, which would be served by this, as well as we have a brand new Mass Bay Community College campus being built or constructed. I know it's a few years out, but that's going to bring a lot of folks looking for public transportation into the downtown Framingham area in the near future.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from MPO members? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve the work scope as presented today? Please raise your hand when you make the motion, state your name. Thatcher Keyser.
There's the mute button. Thatcher Keyser makes motion to approve.
Leonard Diggins.
A second.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Bressa, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kansas, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitz, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
Taking a little while for the unmute option to pop up, but yes.
thank you. Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz votes yes.
Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Yes, I'm sorry. Tina Cassidy votes yes.
thank you. Jennifer Constable,
Jen Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion
Thank
carries.
you. That motion carries. Thank you, Jonathan. Put the next item on the agenda up, please. Page 2. Thank you. Item 9 is an action item for approval of amendment, UPWP amendment number 2. Sandy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I am here to ask the MPO to endorse Amendment 2 to the federal fiscal year 2020 UPWP. You voted to release this amendment for a 30-day public comment period on June 25th. This amendment removes a $60,000 study on transit mitigation for new development sites from the UPWP and inserts two $30,000 studies on Vision Zero and trip generation rates in its place. The MPO has already seen the scope for these two new studies. The UPWP committee voted to recommend endorsement of this amendment earlier this morning. We received one comment on this amendment during the public comment period, as you can see on page 13 of the handout packet. Marilyn Wellens from Cambridge asked us to research licensing and regulations of people using bikes as a part of the Vision Zero study. She has received a reply from me, which I developed in collaboration with other staff, and which you can find in your handout on page 14. We commit to tackling these issues in the study and provide some background on the issue, proceeding from the understanding that the other Vision Zero cities, as well as the Vision Zero network in a recent statement, have acknowledged the limitations of punitive enforcement and prioritized educational and infrastructural rather than regulatory or license-based strategies to achieve safety for all roadway users. This is particularly important in the context of the complicated history between law enforcement and people of color, which we have been discussing recently. I am happy to take any further questions on the amendment at this time. If there are no questions, I request that you endorse this amendment so that it can be approved by the Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions from MPO members? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second? Eric Barassa.
I make the motion to approve this amendment to the UPWP.
Tom Bent.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
You're unmuted, Eric.
Eric Barassa, yes.
thank you. Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Yes, Kazis.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item is UPWB Amendment Number 3. Sandy?
Thank you again. Hello again. I am back to request that the MPO vote to release Amendment 3 to the FFY 2020 UPWP for a 30-day public comment period. First, I want to give a little bit of background on this amendment. Traditionally, staff have presented to the UPWP committee and the MPO a number of reallocations between task lines within the UPWP budget at or near the beginning of the fourth quarter of a given fiscal year. Being able to flexibly reallocate funding with the support of the MPO board is a major benefit to completing all of our work at this point in the year and to adapt to changing conditions and best serve the MPO goals. At this point, we're essentially working off of UPWP budgets that were laid out up to 18 months earlier. However, per Federal Highways Administration guidance issued earlier this year, any change of 10% or more to a UPWP budget line must now be a formal amendment rather than an informal adjustment as we have done in the past. Thus, this amendment moves some money around within the FFY 2020 UPWP as it reflects the changes made in Amendments 1 and 2. Overall, it's net neutral to the budget. This year, there are some unique complications related to COVID and the emergency situation. resulting in some unanticipated project challenges. Like any year, we also adjust budgets to reflect staffing changes, such as staff moving on or someone taking leave. The total amount of money reprogrammed within the UPWP budget is $137,500. Details are available in the handout. The UPWP committee voted this morning to approve the amendment and recommend that you release it for public comment. The public comment period will be for 30 days, commencing tomorrow, August 7th, with endorsement of the amendment expected at the September 17th MPO meeting. I'm happy to take any further questions at this time. If not, I request that you release this amendment for a 30-day public comment period.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions from MPO members? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to release this for a 30-day public comment period? Eric Barassa.
I make the motion to release this amendment to the UPWP for public comment.
Lynn Diggins.
I second.
Motion having been made and seconded, Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Samantha Silverberg, Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kazis, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
thank you, Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Patrick Keyser votes yes.
thank you, Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
and I think Samantha Silverberg has her hand raised now.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Next item up is the amendment number 7 to the 2020 to 20.
I think Matt might be having some audio issues.
All right, let's skip item 11 while Matt tries to work out his audio issues because he's also got item 13. And we'll go to Bradley Putnam and hope he doesn't have audio issues. Bradley, successful shuttles discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Archer, would you be able to move to the first slide? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to present on operating a successful community shuttle program. This is a project that was in the federal fiscal year 2020 UPWP, and the project called for a guidebook to operating a successful shuttle program in the Boston region. The guidebook is complete. It has been attached to the meeting materials for today. I'm going to give you an overview of the guidebook now, and then I'd be happy to take any questions. So MPO staff conducted this study in response to feedback from municipalities and other stakeholders who wanted information about how to develop and operate a successful community shuttle program, including both first and last mile connections and workforce transportation solutions. My former colleague Andrew Clark conducted much of the research for this project, and he spoke to this board earlier this year and presented you all with a working definition of a community shuttle program that staff used in this project. And as a reminder, a community shuttle program is defined as a service that has fixed or flexible routes, but is not fully demand responsive. A community shuttle is open to the public, but it may prioritize or exclusively serve specific populations, such as seniors or persons with disabilities. A community shuttle provides local circulation in municipalities that have otherwise limited or infrequent fixed route transit service, or a community shuttle can provide first or last mile connections to existing fixed route transit service. And a community shuttle may serve various trip purposes, such as commuting, shopping, or traveling to a medical appointment. So for this project, staff undertook two different types of research. First, staff conducted a literature review, and then second, staff interviewed a number of shuttle providers in the region, and those providers are shown on the screen. So the towns of Bedford, Brookline, Burlington, Lexington, and Scituate each operate shuttle services. The one in Brookline is operated by their Council on Aging. It's called the Elder Bus. Scituate operates a shuttle service in partnership with the Greater Attleboro-Taunton Regional Transit Authority, GATRA, and their service is called the Sloop. Other shuttle providers who were interviewed work with transportation management associations. The Charles River Transportation Management Association operates the Easy Ride service in the East Cambridge, MIT North Station area. The North Shore Transportation Management Association operates a service called the Wave that's based at the Beverly Commuter Rail Station. The 128 Business Council operates an assortment of shuttles that connect MBTA services at Alewife Station on the Red Line, Waltham on Commuter Rail, and Newton Highlands on the Green Line. And Crosstown Connect operates in the Acton area and connects to stations on the Fitchburg line of Commuter Rail. And staff also interviewed folks from the Mission Hill Link, which serves the Mission Hill neighborhood of Boston. In addition to the folks you see listed on this screen, MPO staff also interviewed staff from two different state agencies, Mass Mobility and the MassDOT Rail and Transit Division, to ask how collaboration and funding options work, what's available to shuttle providers, and ask about common challenges and opportunities that those state agencies see shuttle providers frequently encountering. Another note about the research for this project, this research was conducted this past winter, which was before COVID became a major part of all of our lives. And so the guidebook that staff produced for this project is not meant to be a guide on how to operate a shuttle during COVID, but rather is meant to be a general reference work that has guidelines and best practices for shuttle operations going into the future. And Matt, next slide, please. Yeah, so from the research that staff conducted, there were 6 major themes that arose from our findings, and they are goal development, service design, performance measurement, funding, branding and marketing, and coordination. And I'd just like to give some of the highlights of our findings on each of these topics. Matt, next slide, please. So for goal development, it's important for folks who are considering starting a shuttle to think about what the goal of their service is. And so just some example goals that a provider could have, there could be a goal to provide a transportation option for people who do not have access to a vehicle or choose not to use a personal vehicle. Another goal could be to provide a transportation option in a place where geography makes walking or bicycling difficult. Another goal could be to provide workforce transportation to a particular employer or a particular group of employers. Another goal could be to provide access to seniors, access for seniors to social activities or medical appointments. A goal could be to reduce congestion, or another goal could be to enable car-free or car-light living. Next slide, please. So for the theme of service design, one of the most important considerations staff found in this research was that anyone considering designing a shuttle service should have a clear understanding, as best they can, of the resources available for providing the service and the cost required to provide the service. With those things in mind, some other service design considerations are, one is routing options. So shuttle providers can do a fixed route option where a shuttle only goes on the predetermined route and does not deviate from it. Or a shuttle provider can consider a flexible route option where there is a fixed route, but the shuttle can go off of that route a certain amount, for example, by a quarter of a mile. And then another service design consideration that potential shuttle operators should think about is how to do the operations. So one option is for a shuttle provider to form a partnership with their regional transit authority to provide vehicles or drivers or both. Another option is for a potential shuttle operator to operate a service directly. And the third option is to contract with a private operator who can also provide vehicles or shuttles, vehicles or drivers or possibly both. Next slide, please. So the next theme we looked at was performance measurement. It's important for a shuttle provider to be measuring their service in order to report back to their various constituencies. For example, riders of a shuttle, it's important to report back on the reliability of the shuttle, which is how often it's on time according to the published schedule. And then for the community at large, including those who ride the shuttle and those who live in the area, it would be important for the shuttle operator to report ridership, how many people are riding the shuttle. And they might also consider reporting a measurement of a reduction in vehicle trips or a reduction in demand for parking or some other way of measuring the impact the shuttle is having on the community. Next slide, please. So the next theme we looked at was funding. One common source of funding for shuttles in the greater Boston area is municipal budgets. Another common source of funding is private partners that fund employer shuttles. These are often put together in the form of Transportation Management Association, where a number of employers that are next to each other will pool their resources in order to fund a shuttle to their area. A third possible source of funding is grants from state agencies, and there are more details about those grants in the guidebook. And many of those grants ask shuttle providers in their grant applications to describe what their plan for funding is, and often that involves leveraging the grant to access either municipal funding or private funding from employers. Next slide, please. So the next theme that staff looked at was branding and marketing. Staff found that it was important for a shuttle provider to build a brand using consistent fonts, colors, graphics on their marketing materials. Another idea was that shuttle providers might consider wrapping the bus. You see an example of this on this slide. The North Shore Wave bus has this lovely blue wave design and its logo on it. The operators of that shuttle found that the shuttle was its own best advertisement because folks would see it driving around town. They would say, "What is that?" And so it was a good way to increase the visibility of the service. Another way to market the service is to have real-time location data available that users can access on their phones. And if real-time data isn't possible, the next best thing would be static schedule data so that users can access that on their phones. Next slide, please. And then the final thing the staff looked at was coordination. It's important for anyone who's considering operating a shuttle to coordinate with the MBTA, as many shuttle services in the region connect to existing MBTA services. Shuttle providers should also consider coordinating with their local regional transit authority. Operators should speak with their neighboring cities and towns, including neighboring councils on aging, to see if it might make sense to consolidate their efforts. And then finally, the MPO itself can provide assistance coordination. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank all of the people who contributed to this project, including all the people who were interviewed. Again, there's a lot more information about all of this in the guidebook that's been posted in meeting materials. But with that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Bradley. Questions from MPO members? Seeing none. Excellent work. Thank you very much. So next item on the agenda is the tip amendment. Does Matt Genova have audio now?
just working on getting him unmuted right now.
Hey everyone, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
This time? Okay, perfect. Sorry about the audio issues earlier. Let me just things. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello everyone. So for my first presentation today, I will give you an overview of Amendment 7 to the federal fiscal years 2020 through 2024 TIP. This comes fast on the heels of Amendments 5 and 6, which were endorsed by this board at the last MPO meeting on July 16th. Amendment 7 was released for a 21-day public review period. On that same day, July 16th, the comment period was closed on August 5th, which is yesterday, and yielded no comments. There is a summary table detailing the contents of Amendment 7 posted to the MPO meeting calendar under today's date, which you're welcome to reference at any point. Amendment 7 includes one project, the awarding of a Mobility for All grant from the Federal Transit Administration to the Metro West RTA. This grant will support MWRTA in exploring a new demand response accessibility model along with complementary technology. This service will expand access to transportation options for seniors and people with disabilities within the Metro West region by supporting strategic partnerships with Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility agencies. Customers will now be able to request trips on demand rather than needing to book in advance, eliminating a significant barrier for many who use the existing service to get to medical appointments and access other essential destinations. The FTA Mobility for All grant is for $300,000, with $75,000 in matching funding coming from state contract assistance. The project is proposed to be amended into federal fiscal year 2021. Since no public comments were submitted on TIP Amendment 7, that's all I have for the amendment. And with that, I will turn it back over to the chair for questions and a final vote.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions from MPO members? Lynn Diggins.
I didn't say anything last time, but I am really happy to see something like this. I mean, this is just a really, really good program. So I'm happy to support it, and I will keep my hand up because I'll make the motion if no one else has a comment.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other comments from MPO members? Seeing none, Lynn, go ahead and make your motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the amendment.
Is there a second? Tom Bent.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz.
Daniel has left the meeting.
Okay. Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is item 13, a discussion of the TIP project selection criteria for economic vitality. Matt Genova?
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just getting set up here. All right, for my second presentation today, I will walk you all through the changes that MPO staff are proposing for the economic vitality criteria used to evaluate prospective TIP projects. This is the final goal area that we need to cover, putting us on track to move into the latter phases of the criteria revision process in the coming weeks. Before we start, I do want to direct you to a companion table for this presentation, which has been posted to the MPO meeting calendar. Please feel free to follow along there as we talk. As with the last few criteria presentations, I'm going to move straight through all four criteria that we're discussing today, and then we'll save questions or comments for the end. And I also want to reiterate that if there's any ground that we don't cover today, although we have quite a bit of time, which is great, your feedback is always welcome anytime outside of a formal meeting setting. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Betsy Harvey, or Kate White if you have any questions or comments on the TIP criteria or the associated outreach efforts. As Tegan noted in her executive director's report earlier today, we did hold a focus group last Monday, July 27th, with 7 MPO members in attendance. At that meeting, we began to discuss point allocations and score weighting across project types and goal areas. I want to thank everyone who attended that session, as it was a fruitful conversation. We'll continue to work with that feedback in the coming days, and we'll incorporate it into our next discussion on the TIP criteria at the August 20th MPO meeting. So this is the ground that I'm hoping to cover during today's presentation. Start out with the goal that we have for today and frame the conversation a little bit with some background information. Talk a little bit about the feedback that we've heard on the economic vitality criteria, both from this board and from other key stakeholders. I'll then get into the proposed changes to the current criteria before talking about a couple of next steps and then opening it up for a conversation. So beginning with really our main goal for today, which is really for you all to provide feedback on the initial proposals for the economic vitality criteria revisions in service of furthering this work in the coming weeks and getting us to a finished product here around the start of the new fiscal year. So I'll start with some notes on framing the conversation a little bit. So today we're talking about economic vitality. And out of the 134 possible points, economic vitality represents 18 of those points, or 13% of all possible points. And that is the third lowest goal area by points, so sort of in the middle of the pack. As established in last year's long-range transportation plan, Destination 2040, there are 4 objectives for economic vitality in the region. The first is to respond to the mobility needs of the workforce population. The second is to minimize the burden of housing and transportation costs for residents in the region. The third goal is to prioritize transportation investments that serve residential, commercial, and logistics targeted development sites and priority places identified in MBTA's Focus 40 plan. And finally, the fourth is to prioritize transportation investments that support development consistent with the compact growth strategies of the Regional Transportation Plan. So like the last several presentations, I want to take a couple of minutes to highlight some of the feedback that we've received on the economic vitality criteria. Because my colleague, Kate White, walked you through the key takeaways from the public outreach that we did last fall at the June 25th MPO meeting, I'll focus today just on the feedback that we've heard from MPO members, as well as from 2 key stakeholders. Those are the Regional Transportation Advisory Council and Transportation for America. So when we surveyed MPO members back in the winter, a handful of key takeaways emerged. We heard that economic vitality is really what results from a transportation system that functions for all people, as everyone can participate fully in the economy and access needed jobs, services, and education. We also heard about the central role that access to housing opportunities plays in economic vitality, especially given the region's affordable housing crunch and the ways that housing choices impact people's ability to access jobs and other key destinations. In the focus group that we held with MPO members, we also heard about the importance of economic vitality for local municipalities, especially as it relates to building a vibrant tax base that supports other public services. And finally, we heard several times about the overlapping nature of economic vitality with other goals like safety and capacity management. And those goals are ones that we've covered as it relates to the new criteria over the last couple of MPO meetings. From the Advisory Council, we again heard similar themes, including the overlapping nature of economic vitality with congestion and quality of life, and the need to more meaningfully consider housing affordability as it relates to our transportation system. From Transportation for America, we also heard the recommendation to simplify and focus our criteria where possible. And we also worked with them to explore a more robust measure of accessibility to jobs and services. So as I've mentioned in prior presentations, measuring destination access with a more robust set of tools is something that we're actively exploring in partnership with MassDOT. Though we won't be ready to implement a new accessibility tool with this iteration of the TIP criteria, we will continue to advance this work in the coming months with the hope of discussing this topic further with you later on this year, perhaps next year. So that work is actively ongoing with our partners at MassDOT, and we will certainly bring that back to you when we have an update. So I'm going to dive into the key changes that we're proposing now. Like my last few criteria presentations, I'm going to go through all of the criteria at once before opening it up for a discussion at the end. And again, if we don't get to everyone's questions or comments today, you're always welcome to reach back out to me directly with any further discussion at any time. And before I start, I do want to thank Eric Barassa, Tim Reardon, and the rest of the MAPC team for their help on these criteria. We scored the economic vitality section in partnership with MAPC staff, and they played a key role in shaping these new criteria. So we really appreciate their time and energy on this effort. So here's a summary of the approach that staff took when compiling these recommendations. The general approach was to focus the criteria and reduce redundancy across goal areas, to clarify existing methodologies, to add consideration of affordable housing in a more direct way, to recognize new geographies based on changing regional and federal policies, and to incentivize early public engagement in project development. In implementing that approach, the new economic vitality criteria fall into 3 buckets, which you see here on the left-hand side of this table. The first is our new criterion, which in this goal area includes a measure of increased access to affordable housing opportunities. Second bucket includes the criteria that currently exist in our scoring system, but that were updated as a part of this process. Those criteria include the extent to which projects serve targeted development sites in the region, support compact growth, and leverage other non-TIP investments. Finally, we also removed one criterion from the economic vitality goal area. That was the criterion that measured providing multimodal access to an activity center. So this criterion formally awarded points to projects for providing transit, pedestrian, bike, and truck access to areas with concentrated economic activity. This criterion was redundant, however, as the criteria that I just mentioned in the updates to existing criteria section already award points to projects for serving dense and growing economic centers. Furthermore, improvements to the transit, pedestrian, bike, and truck network are already recognized in the capacity management and mobility goal area, which we discussed at the last MPO meeting. And for these reasons, we felt like this criterion did not need to be retained in the new scoring system, as it wasn't measuring anything new that wasn't already being measured in other places. So one note, as I dive into the criteria on the coming slides, you'll notice a discussion topics section at the bottom of each slide. I won't reference these or discuss these along the way, but they're really meant to outline some possible avenues for discussion that we can address after the presentation, should you choose to do that, and with whatever time remains. So I'll begin with how we're addressing the equity scoring in the economic vitality goal area. So we're proposing that the economic vitality equity criteria be a little bit different than the other goal areas for a couple of reasons. So unlike the other goal areas, economic vitality doesn't look at project design or the immediate impacts of the project on the transportation system. Rather, the economic vitality scoring focuses on the extent to which a project supports improved access to certain types of land uses that in turn improve the economic outlook of people in the region. So using the equity overlay approach that we're proposing for the other goal areas doesn't really make sense here because we want to reward projects for connecting equity populations with jobs and services, not reward projects in places where equity populations already live adjacent to jobs and services. So to measure equity in the economic vitality goal area, we're proposing introducing an economic vitality specific equity criterion that evaluates transportation improvements near affordable housing, presuming that projects will improve access to jobs and other destinations for low-income populations if they serve residential areas with affordable housing opportunities. So this will be done by comparing the percent of housing units within the project area that are eligible for inclusion in a municipality's subsidized housing inventory with a share of 40B eligible housing in the region. The higher the share of affordable housing in the project area, the more points it would get. So again, this is the new criterion for economic vitality, and I will move now into the changes to the existing criteria within this goal area. So beginning with serving a targeted development site, the changes proposed here aren't significant, but are really more of an effort to refine and clarify the existing criterion. This criterion awards points for improving access to future development sites around the region. And in the scoring, we wanted to recognize not just new transit access, but also new bicycle and pedestrian access to these sites. So really just clarifying how we measure the existing criterion. We've also proposed some minor updates to the geographic locations that are eligible for points through this criterion, including adding MBTA priority places and federal opportunity zones. We also removed consideration of the regionally significant priority development areas, as these are no longer an active policy initiative here in the region. Moving now to provides for development consistent with MAPC's regional plan. This criterion awards points to projects that increase access to existing areas of concentrated development. Currently, projects score points for the extent to which they serve these densely developed areas, and can also score points for serving areas that have mixed use zoning and that have a Main Streets Association or Business Improvement District. The main change here is to remove the points for zoning, as the previous criterion already awards points for serving areas where future development will happen. We're also proposing to remove the points for serving an area with a Main Streets Organization or Business Improvement District, as these designations are tangential to the goal of promoting access to areas of concentrated development, which is really the sort of main thrust of this criterion. So overall, these changes promote a more focused and simplified criterion that centers around connecting people with existing densities of jobs, housing, and services. And finally, moving to leverages other investments. This criterion awards points to projects that cover some portion of the project cost using non-tip funding sources, but does not apply to project design. The changes to this criterion are not significant, but rather are an effort to build upon an existing scoring approach that works pretty well. The key addition here is to allow projects to score bonus points if project proponents conduct robust community engagement on a project prior to seeking funding through the TIP. This could involve a pilot project, but could also include other dedicated community engagement efforts that are project specific. The hope here is to use this as one possible lever to mitigate cost changes after a project is programmed, as project proponents should have a better sense of community desires before seeking TIP funds. This also complements nicely some of the feedback we've heard from the MPO and the Advisory Council on the importance of the 3C planning process, as this directly encourages the cooperative element of that work by engaging local stakeholders early in the project, again, before a project seeks funding through the TIP. So that covers all of the criteria for today. And before we get into a discussion, I just want to talk about a couple of next steps. So today, obviously, we are wrapping up our discussion of the economic vitality goal area. At the next MPO meeting on August 20th, we'll discuss the allocation of points across goal areas and project types. This will give us an opportunity to recap some of the feedback from last week's MPO member focus group, and then get broader input from the rest of the board on the structure of the overall scoring system. In September, we'll take the feedback from the August 20th meeting and continue to refine the scoring system while showing examples of how the new system plays out through the test scoring of a cross-section of TIP projects. We've also begun a second round of public outreach on the TIP criteria. We released a survey last week in which we're asking folks if the changes that we've proposed reflect their priorities for transportation in the region. We've also scheduled a handful of focus groups with members of the public as well. In September, we'll present those results to this board. To help support this outreach, we've also created a criteria guidebook, which Tegan mentioned earlier in today's meeting. This has been posted to the meeting calendar under today's date, and we certainly encourage you all to take a look at it if you have time. Around the start of the new federal fiscal year on October 1st, we anticipate arriving at a final draft of the new criteria, so we're very much entering the home stretch of this overall body of work. With that, I'm happy to take questions or comments with any remaining time that we have.
Thank you, Matt. Questions, comments from MPO members? Lynn Diggins.
So first I want to say that with respect to the comments from the advisory council regarding housing affordability, the gentrification part was something that we wanted to see explored, partly as a modeling exercise, because to the extent that we can predict that gentrification is going to happen, especially around TODs, then we need to determine how we're going to deal with that, because as I think many of us are aware, a lot of times we will get pushback from the community when we try to bring in a station or some kind of new transit, maybe because it's like, well, low-income people are going to be priced out of their own neighborhoods, whereas a lot of us see TOD as a good thing. Certainly understand why residents in that area would have problems with this. So to the extent that we can predict it and then try to mitigate it in some way, I think it'd make it easier to sell big transit developments in a given area. So that's my comment. My question actually refers to, I forget the organization that wanted us to simplify the criteria, because if anything, we're not doing that. So I'm kind of curious as to what they had in mind when it comes to simplifying the criteria, so that we can maybe address that as we move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Len. It's a great question. So their feedback was really from Transportation for America. And as a quick reminder for folks, we had about a year-long technical assistance project ongoing with T for America and the State Smart Transportation Initiative, SSTI. And so some of their feedback was to take a look at our existing criteria and really sort of focus in on the key objective for each of them. And so we've attempted to do that where possible, but there is sort of like this a secondary approach to this, which we've also gotten a lot of feedback on, which is to sort of appropriately measure aspects of projects that we weren't really capturing before. And so I think we still have a lot of sort of fine tuning with the initial proposals before we get to a finished product, and that's very much the intent of the next couple of months here. And so we're hoping to take some of these initial proposals and perhaps whittle them down into something more focused. But we are through this process trying to strike that balance between measuring things that are important that we weren't fully measuring before, but also trying to focus other aspects of the criteria where that's possible. Yeah.
Matt, has been any discussion about getting additional points for projects that are receiving mitigation funds from developers? Mitigation could be for transportation, infrastructure, that type of thing.
Yeah, so that's a great question. That would come into play in the last criterion around leveraging other investments. And so, private funding from a developer or a foundation or sort of any other, non-TIP funding source would certainly be considered. And obviously, if the municipality is kicking in some of their own public funds or is using some other, public grant process or anything like that. Sort of all of the above would be considered. And so, yeah, the hope is definitely, if municipalities are developing those relationships with real estate developers in their region, and using that to offset some of the direct project costs to, using federal dollars in the tip, then that would certainly get points here.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from MPO members? Being none, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is member announcements. Do any members have any announcements they'd like to make at this time? Ken Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to mention that we have Federal Highway has forwarded the state's request for redistribution to our headquarters. We expect to receive a response by the end of August. So depending upon, as everyone knows, I think that there's $50 million programmed in the statewide among the MPOs and around the state. There's automatically $50 million assumed as redistribution. The state put in a request for $85 million, so we'll see what happens. So I just wanted to give folks a heads up that there may be some, depending upon how much is received, we won't know until the end of August. There may have to be some adjustments to tips or projects that will take place at the very end of the year. Is that fair to say, David, I think?
I think that's fair to say, Ken. Other items? Sheila Page.
Can we ask Ken for, I guess I'm not understanding. This is money already programmed in and there's going to be a change to it?
Right, so I'll answer and then Ken can jump in if he thinks the need. So every year at the beginning, so first off, let me make sure everybody remembers what redistribution is. When states can't spend all of their federal highway money, that money is then put, the amount that can't be spent is put into a pot for other states that can spend more than their money to try to access through an application process. We always assume at the beginning of the tip year that we will be successful in capturing $50 million of that money because historically we've been successful in capturing $50 million or more. So that 50 million is programmed in the tip and is currently programmed for existing projects. If for some reason we didn't capture at least 50 million, we would have to take projects out of the tip. We don't expect that to happen, but that is always a possibility.
Okay.
In addition, we've asked for more than the 50, we've asked for 85. And if we actually are successful in capturing some number above 50 up to 85, we would have to come back to the tips and amend projects to spend that money.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
No worries. Thank you. Can I get a motion in a second to adjourn, please? Sheila Page.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Eric Barassa.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great day, everybody. Nice weekend.